How much motivate? Let's go look new video.
It was a gray, brisk afternoon in 1943 when Dr. Abraham Maslow sat in his office at Brooklyn College, the pages of his research scattered across the desk before him. The world was still reeling from the consequences of the Second World War, and Maslow, a keen observer of human nature, knew that humanity had been tested in ways no one could have ever anticipated. The suffering, the violence, the loss, he felt it all deeply. Yet, amid this chaos, he saw something else rising, something he believed could spark a transformation. Maslow was no stranger to the conventional views of motivation. Since the early days of psychology, many had understood human motivation in simple terms: survival. It was the domain of primal instincts: food, shelter, and reproduction. The philosophy echoed through thinkers like Freud and Skinner, who emphasized the importance of basic drives and external rewards. But Maslow, ever the challenger of convention, began to question that narrative. What if there was more to human existence than just survival? What if the drive for meaning and fulfillment went beyond mere need? Over years of studying human behavior, Maslow developed what he would later call the hierarchy of needs. It was a pyramid, a metaphor for how humans developed from basic needs to higher aspirations, culminating in what he termed self-actualization. But what did this mean? What could it mean for the future of humanity? In that moment, Maslow realized that discipline, the rigorous effort to adhere to societal norms and expectations, wasn't just about conformity. It could be a tool for growth, a way to climb the pyramid of human potential. Maslow's theory was radical. While the dominant psychological theories of his time focused on reactive behaviors or rigid structures of authority, he proposed that people were not just slaves to survival instincts, but could aspire to greatness, creativity, and profound personal fulfillment. His revolutionary idea would lay the groundwork for countless changes in fields ranging from psychology to education, business, and even politics. Maslow's hierarchy was a simple structure but rich in its implications. At the base were basic physiological needs: food, water, warmth, and rest. These were the most immediate needs, without which survival was impossible. Above that, safety needs, security, safety from harm, stability, were crucial. Once those basic needs were met, individuals moved up the pyramid, desiring things like love and belonging, social connections, family, friendships, esteem, self-respect, and the respect of others. And ultimately, at the pinnacle, self-actualization, the realization of one's full potential, the ability to live authentically and achieve one's personal best. Maslow's insight was this: self-actualization could not be reached if the foundational needs weren't met. The ladder, as he envisioned it, had to be climbed step by step, each stage building on the last. But where Maslow's thinking began to differentiate itself was in his view of the journey. It was not simply about meeting needs, but about growing and becoming. The discipline required to climb higher wasn't just about obeying orders. It was about fostering the discipline that allowed individuals to grow, to strive toward personal greatness. The world wasn't ready for this idea, but Maslow was not one to back down. He was determined to share his theory with the world. It wasn't easy. Maslow's ideas were met with skepticism. Many of his colleagues, accustomed to the rigid scientific views of behaviorism and psychoanalysis, saw his focus on subjective experiences and personal growth as speculative, even impractical. In their eyes, psychology should be objective, grounded in observable behaviors and data, not philosophical aspirations. But Maslow had lived through the Great Depression and the horrors of World War II. He had seen firsthand the depths of human suffering and the resilience of the human spirit. It was clear to him that human motivation was not just about escaping pain or avoiding danger. It was about transcending those challenges, about reaching for something higher. People, he believed, had the potential for greatness, but it was often blocked by societal constraints and the pursuit of mere survival. In his seminal paper, A Theory of Human Motivation, published in Psychological Review in 1943, Maslow proposed a new framework. He described individuals who, despite having their basic needs met, could still feel unfulfilled, yearning for something more meaningful. These individuals were not just pursuing pleasure or avoiding discomfort, they were seeking growth. Maslow used the term self-actualization to describe this desire, the fulfillment of one's unique potential. But self-actualization was not a fixed point. It was an ongoing process. Maslow believed that individuals could pursue self-actualization throughout their lives, continually evolving, developing new capabilities, and breaking through personal barriers. It was about becoming the best version of oneself, not just surviving or conforming to societal expectations. Maslow's ideas soon attracted a following among those interested in humanistic psychology, an approach that emphasized personal growth, freedom, and the inherent goodness of people. But acceptance came slowly. Critics dismissed Maslow as idealistic and unscientific, accusing him of focusing on rare, exceptional cases rather than universal human experiences. He was also criticized for failing to account for the darker aspects of human nature, the greed, the selfishness, the violence. But Maslow's response was clear. We are not defined by our limitations, but by our potential to overcome them. As his theory began to spread, Maslow's name became synonymous with hope for a better, more fulfilled human existence. He began to see his research as part of a larger mission, a mission to help humanity climb its own pyramid, to break free from the constraints of survival and tap into its deepest, most transformative potential. Maslow's ideas, though controversial at the time, would eventually influence a range of fields, from psychology to business to education. His work would come to be seen not as a rejection of earlier psychological theories, but as an extension of them, a broader, more inclusive understanding of human motivation. By the 1950s, Maslow's ideas began to gain traction, especially among educators and those in the emerging field of humanistic psychology. Schools started to take note of his work, incorporating elements of self-actualization into curricula designed to foster creativity and independent thought. Educators began to recognize that discipline wasn't just about instilling conformity. It could also be about creating an environment in which students could explore their potential, think critically, and grow. In the workplace, businesses began to shift their focus from mere productivity to human development. Maslow's influence helped shape the idea that employees were not just tools to be used for profit, but people who could achieve greater levels of fulfillment and creativity when their higher needs were met. Companies began to realize that when people felt valued, respected, and part of something bigger than themselves, they became more motivated and productive. The 1960s and 1970s saw the rise of the self-help movement, and Maslow's ideas were central to this cultural shift. Books, workshops, and seminars on personal development flourished, and Maslow's ideas about self-actualization began to filter into mainstream consciousness. People began to talk not just about making a living, but about making a life. It wasn't enough to be successful in the material sense. People wanted to feel fulfilled, to live authentic, meaningful lives. Maslow had flipped the script. He had shown the world that human beings could transcend their basic survival instincts and reach for something greater. His vision of discipline was not one of rigid obedience, but of self-determined growth, a journey toward becoming the best version of oneself. But there was still much work to be done. The world was still full of suffering, inequality, and injustice. Maslow knew that true self-actualization could only be achieved in a world where the basic needs of all people were met. For Maslow, the pyramid wasn't just a metaphor for individual development. It was a call to action for society as a whole. Only when all people had access to the conditions necessary for growth, physical security, emotional connection, and opportunities for personal development, could the full potential of humanity be realized. Maslow's legacy is the understanding that human beings are more than just creatures of habit or instinct. They are capable of growth, transformation, and achieving greatness, if given the right tools, environment, and opportunities. His ideas continue to resonate today in classrooms, boardrooms, and homes around the world, reminding us that the human journey is not just about surviving. It's about growing, becoming, and achieving the highest version of ourselves. By the 1970s, Abraham Maslow had become more than just a psychologist. He was seen as a visionary, a gentle revolutionary who dared to ask, what does it mean to be fully human? Though he passed away in 1970, his influence only grew, like a seed finally reaching for sunlight. His hierarchy of needs was being taught in universities, shaping leadership styles in companies, inspiring curriculum changes in education, and redefining what success looked like, not just in society, but in the soul of each individual. The world had changed, and yet it hadn't. Wars still raged. Inequality persisted. But now there was a framework, a lens through which to view humanity not as a problem to be controlled, but a possibility to be nurtured. Maslow's pyramid was never just a staircase to a personal summit. It was a mirror, a reflection of what we all strive for, often unconsciously. We begin at the bottom, hungry, cold, afraid. We seek food, water, shelter, safety. The first victories of life are the most primal ones. But once those are secure, we hunger for connection, for love, friendship, and the warmth of being understood. And when we find that, another kind of yearning stirs. We want respect, not just from others, but from ourselves. We want to feel capable, seen, worthy. But the highest peak, the most fragile and rarefied air, is self-actualization. It is the artist finally painting what they see in their mind. It's the entrepreneur building something not just for money, but for meaning. It's the teacher staying late because they believe in a student who doesn't yet believe in themselves. Maslow described these self-actualized people as fully functioning, deeply engaged with life, and motivated by growth, not fear. They were not perfect, but they were real, authentic. Their discipline didn't come from external rewards or punishments. It came from within, from the desire to be whole. But Maslow warned that the path to self-actualization wasn't guaranteed. It required not only that one's needs be met, but that the individual choose to grow. Growth, he said, was a choice, a daily one. You could retreat into safety, into what was familiar and easy, or you could step forward into the unknown, into learning, into becoming. This idea, that self-actualization is a process, not a place, resonated deeply. It gave people permission to be unfinished, to see their struggles not as failures, but as steps. The pyramid became less a ladder of achievement and more a map for understanding ourselves and others. Where is this person on their path? What need is unmet? What does their behavior say about what they're missing? From therapists to HR departments, from parents to community leaders, the question shifted from, "What's wrong with you?" to "What do you need?" In the decades that followed, new thinkers built upon Maslow's work. Carol Rogers, Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, and others explored the mechanics of growth, creativity, and flow. In education, social-emotional learning emerged, recognizing that a child cannot learn algebra if they're terrified of going home. In business, purpose-driven work became a rallying cry. And in healthcare, the focus began to shift from treating symptoms to addressing the whole person, their environment, their relationships, their sense of meaning. But even as the world changed, Maslow's message remained timeless. We are all becoming. In a modern world full of distractions and pressures, Maslow's theory is more relevant than ever. The digital age has met many of our lower needs: information, food delivery, even online therapy, but has also amplified our insecurities and alienation. In a time of constant comparison and curated perfection, the journey to self-actualization can feel more like an uphill climb against a landslide. And yet, it is still possible. In a small studio apartment, a single mother paints after putting her kids to bed, expressing her truth in quiet colors. In a high school classroom, a shy teenager gives a speech for the first time, voice shaking but eyes bright. In a prison library, a man studies philosophy, daring to imagine a different kind of future. In a corner office, a CEO chooses sustainability over profit, knowing it will outlive her career. Each one is climbing, step by step. Not perfectly, not without falling, but climbing nonetheless. And that's the beauty of the pyramid. It doesn't promise perfection, it promises possibility. It reminds us that beneath every harsh word, every failed test, every missed opportunity, there is a person trying to meet a need. And that with the right support, the right love, the right chance, they can rise. Maslow taught us that the purpose of discipline isn't to create obedience, it's to cultivate freedom. The freedom to grow, to choose, to reach. He gave us a language for our longings and a structure for our becoming. He didn't just build a pyramid. He mapped the human soul, and then handed us the compass.